Hello, and welcome once again to North Central Cinema. I'm your host, Joseph W. Smith III. Call me Joe, please. Today I would like to start North Central Cinema by telling you a story. In 2010, and by the way, this is a true story, a search and rescue volunteer named Pam Bales set out for a recreational hike in New England's White Mountains, where Mount Washington is. She wasn't on a rescue mission, she was just going for a bit of a hike. She got about halfway through it, and the snow really started coming down, temperature started dropping. She decided she'd have to turn around. But just as she was about to do that, she noticed some footprints ahead of her in the snow, and they were alarming footprints because they had been made by sneakers, not the right kind of footwear for those conditions or that terrain. So Bales followed the footprints and found a young man sitting by himself by the trail. He was wearing sneakers and shorts and was pretty much completely unresponsive, could not even tell her his name. And yet somehow, in the worsening storm, Bales got him down off that mountain safely before dark. Later, she learned that he had gone up there to take his own life. Pam Bales was 60 years old when she did that. That is the true story basis of one of the two movies we're going to talk about today. That was recently made into a film, which is now in theaters, called Infinite Storm. And the other film, which we'll talk about a bit later, is called The Lost City. Now, Infinite Storm stars Naomi Watts as Bales, and it is worth seeing for her performance alone. It isn't worth too much more than that. The problem is that they, in typical Hollywood fashion, they over-embellished and over-dramatized everything that actually happened. They started including all kinds of things in this adventure that didn't really happen that day. Bales falls through the snow into this deep hole. She does that twice. Both of them go plunging down the mountainside. The young man appears to try to kill himself by leaping off a cliff again. And then what put the icing on the cake for me was they both fall into the river at the end. And I hate it when Hollywood does that. In his weakened condition, he would not have survived more than an hour after falling into the river, certainly not until he got dried off. In fact, I actually broke my cell rule about theaters and busted out my cell phone. I opened up, it's based on a newspaper article. And I opened that up and I was reading because I just couldn't believe, I didn't remember that all this stuff had happened, having read the story some years ago. So that kind of ruined it for me. They did add one thing that I thought kind of worked. They gave Bales a backstory with a couple of daughters. I don't think Bales has any children. There's not much information available about her on the internet. But I thought that part worked. It gave her a motivation. It gave her a connection with the hiker. And incidentally, the final scene in the film, which takes place in a cafe, also did not happen. And it would have had to have been much better acted and written in order to provide the sort of closure that I think the filmmakers wanted. So this is by no means a bad film. It's worth watching for Watts. She's one of my two favorite actresses, the other being Golden Age great Myrna Loy. You know, if you think about Naomi Watts, her cinematic resume is frankly staggering. Somehow or other, she keeps getting herself cast in these like cult fave movies that everybody loves and whose reputation continues to grow over the years. Here's a partial resume of hers. She was in Birdman. She was in Peter Jackson's King Kong. A bit too long, but a very good movie. A sort of under-the-radar film called While We're Young with Ben Stiller, terrific movie. This, also under the radar, dynamite thriller from David Cronenberg called Eastern Promises, a knockout movie from 2007. 21 Grams, which got her an Academy Award nomination, St. Vincent, The Glass Castle, and the critically acclaimed Mulholland Drive. If you are a Watts fan like me, I feel that her two best performances are, there's a fairly recent Netflix movie called Penguin Bloom, in which she plays a young mother paralyzed from the chest down. Very, very good film and a hopeful one. And then I think her best performance is in this from 2012. It's a movie about the Indian Ocean tsunami, also based on a true story. And she plays a mother who got swept away in the flood, got herself an Academy Award nomination for that as well. How she doesn't have an Oscar yet is kind of beyond me, although in this year, she lost to Jennifer Lawrence for Silver Linings Playbook, and kind of hard to argue with that. Anyway, so there's Infinite Storm. If you're a Watts fan, maybe wait till it comes up on streaming. Not a bad film, but could have been a lot better. The Lost City, on the other hand, a very different film and much more successful. The principal thing to say about it is literally laugh out loud funny. People in the theater were roaring all around us, and my wife and I, at least as loudly as the rest. It's an adventure comedy with Sandra Bullock and Channing Tatum. Essentially a remake of a nearly 40-year-old classic comedy called Romancing the Stone, with a little bit of African Queen thrown in. The plot is a little complicated. Bullock plays a romance novelist, and she writes these jungle adventures, and there's this dashingly handsome fellow who stars in all the books. And he's constantly modeled on the cover of all these books by this sort of primpy modern male played by Channing Tatum. And in reality, the two of them are nothing like their counterpart. She's nothing like the woman in her books, and he's nothing like the guy on the cover. Until one day, she gets kidnapped. Because she has some archaeological expertise, she gets kidnapped by this loony tycoon who thinks that she can help him decipher this ancient runes, set of runes he has, and find this artifact called the Crown of Fire. And pretty soon they wind up stuck in the jungle with nothing but a little massage oil and a knapsack and this sequined purple jumpsuit that Bullock is wearing. The dialogue is funny, the action is funny. Tatum and Bullock have a lot of chemistry. There's a wonderful supporting cast. Brad Pitt makes a very fitting appearance. Oscar Nunez from The Office comes in and plays a very different sort of character, this sort of scruffy jungle pilot. Daniel Radcliffe plays the villain. And very funny, very exciting, very satisfying. And one of the other pluses about it is, it's one of those rare romantic comedies where the male and female protagonist actually do not sleep together, although they actually have plenty of opportunities. How many rom-coms can you think of over the last 40 or 50 years where the couple doesn't sleep together? It's a rarity. There's only perhaps a dozen of them. In fact, that may be an upcoming North Central Cinema installment. Perhaps we'll talk briefly about recent rom-coms from the past 30 or 40 years where the protagonists do not sleep together. If you have a suggestion to make along those lines, or you just want to argue about movies, drop me a line at robwhitefan@gmail.com. In the meantime, here's a couple of movies you might consider, particularly The Lost City. Thank you for joining us, and I hope to see you again in a week or two at North Central Cinema.
At UPMC, we're pioneering new ways to treat cancer, and we're working to prevent it. We're advancing new technology to look more closely at disease and helping you breathe easier. We perform the world's first heart-liver transplant, and we're experts at keeping your heart beating strong. We're a global team of more than 90,000, advancing care everywhere and delivering it closer to you. UPMC, life-changing medicine.